Welcome to another Extra Mile here. Those of you who are paid subscribers of Dashboard Jesus and all this, you're getting this extra mile. Please encourage others to join our community. Would love it. And especially, I think some of the people in your life, as well as you, might be able to benefit from the conversation I want to have with you today. First of all, I want to point out the new edition. We're all thinking it. We're all seeing it. The thing right there. Little Dashboard Jesus sign. If you have not yet gone to the new website, and posting a big announcement that it's there and it's accessible and all of that, but dashboardjesus.net, it's out there. You should check it out and bookmark it. It'll have some valuable resources for you. It'll be updated a lot more frequently than peterheck.com is and things like that. But anyway, Dashboard Jesus, the sign is here. Now there's another edition that's coming, and if you're watching this on the youtube.com, then you'll see it when it gets here. I'll have to tell the rest of you about it. And I know that the old logo for the Heckfire is still on the microphone. I'm going to have to chisel that thing off. But again, if anybody was wondering, is he going to rebrand after another 1 week of this? No, I'm very content, very happy, very excited about where we're going. Here's my question, and I know that some of you are maybe retired. Some of you aren't still going to work on Monday, and that's okay on Mondays, but how do you feel every Monday morning? Maybe the better question to ask is, how do you feel on Sunday night? Church is done. Maybe you go home, you have a Sunday dinner, you go out to eat. Maybe you take a nap on Sundays and you wake up and it's late afternoon, maybe it's into early evening. What is your feeling on Sunday evenings? Can I tell you the feeling that I have had? Without much exception, since, I don't know, my earliest conscious memories when I was in elementary school, I largely had this feeling. Now, there were times like when America's Funniest Home Videos was on. Do you remember that? The old AFV, the old school, with Bob Saget as the host and all that, really when the show first came out. And they were legitimate home videos. They weren't things that had been set up. They were things people had actually sent in on their VHS tapes. That was always on Sunday nights. And I do remember always looking forward to that coming on. But in the back of your head on Sunday, how many of you have that sense of dread? How many of you get that feeling of, start of another week? I got to get to bed, and when I wake up, I'm going to have to start another week. You sense the profound difference between your feeling on Friday afternoon or Friday night and your feeling on Sunday night. Now, part of that is just the reality of work in a fallen world and all of that. But legitimately, I think that there are many of us that struggle in our understanding of what work is. I've had enough conversations now with people who attend my church or people who I've spoken to at other churches looking for their, and this is how they put it, their place in the world. And it usually boils down to something along the lines of, this can't be what all God has for me. There's no way that God intended for me to work in a factory. All I do is go and push a button every day or a couple buttons every day. That's all I do. And not only is it boring for me, I don't see any spiritual value in it. I don't see any purpose in it. Most people, I don't have a study. I don't have a scientific study, but I think that it's fair to say that most people are tempted at many times to regard our jobs as challenges, as exhausting, sometimes even consuming. And I think far too often they're depressing. They're depressing because we don't see the value in them. And honestly, when you start thinking biblically, when you start thinking from an eternal lens, it is easy to slip into the mindset of, okay, take my job. Now, do I have relationships with young people at school, and do I try to be a good example for them and all of those things? Yes, but somebody will quickly take my place once I'm gone. And they'll be different than me, but they will forge relationships and they'll have an impact, and hopefully they'll use it towards godliness and for godliness and all of that, and I hope. But my position will be quickly filled by somebody else, and your position will be quickly filled by somebody else. And you move forward a couple generations after we're gone, maybe just one generation after we're gone, and nobody's going to remember us. And even those that remember us, they remember vaguely our names, but they don't really remember what we contributed to society. And so it's easy to start thinking, what's the point of all of this? Well, what's the point of the work that I'm doing? Is there any ultimate value in it, or should I be doing something else? I think it causes a lot of people consternation. It causes a lot of people maybe even a crisis, an identity crisis, what do they call it? A midlife crisis people have, where they abandon their jobs, their vocations, and they go someplace else. I think it is important for us to understand a few things, biblically speaking, about our work. And again, maybe this isn't a struggle for you. Maybe you're not somebody that your vocation, it just doesn't make sense and you don't see. Here's what I'm going to suggest to those of us that we do get into that rut and we do think those things. And by the way, those of you who maybe are stay at home, maybe you're retired, or you are currently unemployed, whatever the case may be, this applies to you as well. It applies to anybody and everybody that does anything. Like, I've always hated the whole, do you have a job or do you just stay home? And you know why I hate it, because that, of course, is assuming that the person that stays home that managing a household isn't an extraordinary skill and an extraordinary responsibility. I'm going to suggest to you, from a biblical standpoint, that you understanding and you grasping, and us, I should say, not just you, us making sense of the job that we have here on earth, it's not going to make sense and it's not going to click with us unless we understand the purpose of our life. Maybe even more fundamental than that. Maybe we should just say the purpose of the universe. Until we grasp that, we're really going to struggle to understand the significance of our work and the importance of our work. When you understand what's going on in the universe, what it's all leading up to and what it's all going to and towards, then I think we start to grasp the significance of what we're here for and what we're doing here. Let me start with this idea that the universe has been created to glorify God. It's been created by God, and the whole point of the universe and everything that's happening and everything that is leading to an end, that end is the ultimate glorification and glory of God. Which means that everything that occurs in this universe, and for us, we're talking here on planet Earth, everything that's occurring here, which means everything that's occurring on a daily basis in your job and my job, and jobs in places that we don't have any idea, ultimately, the ultimate purpose of that is the glory of God. Now, do some people engage in their work in a way that is meant to bring God glory? No, they don't. They're not conscious of it. What I'm suggesting is, if you are looking for what the purpose of your work is, it is the same as the purpose of everything that happens, and it's the glory of God. If you are missing out on the feeling of accomplishment and the feeling that your work has value, it's that right there. It's that you are not properly understanding what the ultimate objective of your work is. Now, I know the next thing that you're going to say. I work a cash register. That's what I do. Or I work at the pharmacy. That's what I do. How am I glorifying God by that? I'm a mechanic. That's what I do. How am I glorifying God by doing that? Okay, so let's start here. Work was created good. From the very beginning, it was there. Work then became corrupted by sin. We know that to be the case. We know that the work that we engage in was partly redeemed by the work of the Holy Spirit, and we know that eventually work will be fully redeemed by Jesus. You know, in the Garden of Eden, God rested on the seventh day. He rested from what? meaning when he rested, he commemorated what? All of his work. He had done work. He formed man out of the dust and the ground. This is the God of eternity with his hands in the dirt. Don't lose sight of that. By the way, why was Adam put in the garden? Genesis 2:15. Adam was put in the Garden of Eden to work it and to keep it. This is 2:15. That is before the fall. Work was always part of God's plan, the maintenance of his creation. This is after you grasp that, we have this tendency to think that work is something that we have to do, and it's drudgery, and it's toil, and it's monotonous, and all of those things. Okay, why is that the case? Because after work had been created good, just like man and everything had been created good, sin entered into the equation. And in the curse that falls on man, this is what we read. God says, "Cursed is the ground because of you. In pain you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you. And you shall eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your brow you shall eat bread." Now work becomes drudgery. Sin fundamentally changes everything. It changes our relationship with each other. It changes our relationship with God. It changes our relationship with nature. It changes our relationship with work. All of it, with childbirth, all of it is marred and changed by sin. But then, when God boots Adam and Eve out of the garden, what happens? Genesis 3:23. The Lord God sent him out from the Garden of Eden to do what? To work the ground from which he was taken. It was always a plan. It was always part, pre-curse and post-curse, of what we are to do. Let me show you something else too. When we're talking about work, no matter how menial the work is, there is dignity to it because it was God ordained. Now that's a highfalutin, high-sounding theological principle, but I want to encourage you with something. I'm going to read to you from Psalm 145. I want you to listen to this. Okay? This is a God who's caring for his creation, and the psalmist writes these words. This is verses 15 and 16 of Psalm 145. "The eyes of all look to you, and you give them their food in due season. You open your hand. You satisfy the desire of every living thing." Okay, you and I are fed by God, correct? That's what the psalmist clearly says. Everything that we have and that we consume has been given to us by God. How does God do that? Does manna descend from heaven as it did in the wilderness post-Exodus? Does it descend from heaven and fall into our lap or into our yard and we go out and collect it? Do ravens bring it to us as they did for Elijah when he was being cared for in the wilderness? Is that how God feeds us? No, it's not at all. He feeds us through human workers. He feeds us through farmers. He feeds us through the people that create the fertilizer. He feeds us through the drivers. He feeds us through the bakers. He feeds us through the grocers and all of the other people along the way. Yes, God is feeding us, and we know that to be the case, but he is using human agency to accomplish it. God blessing humanity through the work that he had always designed humans to do. He's behind it all, no matter how menial the job is. Look at the prayer that Jesus taught us to pray. "Give us this day our daily bread." That's Matthew 6:11. And how does he give us our bread this day? By dispatching people to their jobs. That's how he does it. Let me read to you something that Tim Keller once wrote. I've got this sitting in front of me. I got to share it with you. Now listen, some of you need to hear this. Not only are the most modest jobs, like plowing a field or digging a ditch, it's not difficult, in other words, for me to convince you, if you hold a position of the mayor of the city, most people who are mayors, who are over a lot of people and making decisions that affect a lot of people's lives, they don't struggle to understand what their purpose is. I'm going to suggest to you that the person that digs a ditch is just as critical in God's view of work, has just as much dignity in their work as that mayor does. Let me get back to what Keller wrote. Not only are the most modest jobs like plowing a field and digging a ditch the masks through which God cares for us, but so are the most basic social roles and tasks, such as voting, participating in public institutions, being a father, or being a mother. These are all God's callings. They're all ways of doing God's work in the world, all ways through which God distributes his gifts to us. Even the humblest farm girl is fulfilling God's calling. Martin Luther once said this: God milks the cows through the vocation of the milkmaids. Yes, he designed cows to have milk that we would be able to have. That's very true. But you only get it if somebody goes out and milks those cows. Well, we got machines to do it now. Who designed the machines? Who repairs the machines? God feeding humanity and blessing humanity through human agency and human work. You work in an automobile factory. The automobile that you are helping design and make is an automobile that is going to take a bleeding brother who suffered a terrible accident on the farm to an emergency room where somebody else has been taken by a vehicle to work there that day. Maybe a vehicle that you made. Because you did your job well, that vehicle will get them to where they need to be. People being served, and that's just but one example. People going to do this, people going to do that. Those things all have an impact for God's glory. This is more of what Keller wrote. The glorious teaching of the Bible is you can be a person on an assembly line. You can be just turning the screw. You can be somebody who's just sweeping a floor. But if you see it as part of the whole complex way God has enabled us to bring the potential out of his creation, then you can do it with joy. Paul was writing to slaves. Have you ever paused to consider that? Paul is writing to slaves. And what do we always focus on when we read those things like in Ephesians 6, 5 through 8? Whenever you read those passages, think, oh, geez, how am I going to explain this to the world? Because we know how bad slavery is. And here's Paul who's talking to slaves and telling them what they need to do and how they need to do it. He's not saying you ought to bust those chains and get out of slavery. So how am I going to explain this? That's what we always focus on. What if we focused on something else? What Paul is saying is, to the slave, he's saying the way that you work, you're not working for your master on earth. The way that you work, you're working for God's glory. When you do that, Paul says, then you can see it as part of everything that God made work to be, and you can do it with joy. And that's being said to slaves. Now, I know that some of us feel sometimes like we are being driven by slave masters, but we're not. I think it's important to remind us of this because sometimes people are led astray. I want to remind you, in Genesis, God, the creator of the universe, the author of all life, God is seen as a gardener. The very beginning, he's seen as a gardener. In the New Testament, God is seen as a carpenter. Both of those very menial tasks. Nothing profound, nothing earth-shattering, pretty humble. Gardener and carpenter. No task is too small of a vessel. No job, no vocation, no responsibility is too small of a vessel to hold the immense dignity that comes in working for the glory of God. Yeah, I'm at a small little rural high school. I preach at a small little rural country church. To people who are small individuals in the grand scheme of life. And we all have lives that are here one second and gone the next. It is easy to look at that and say, I'm not really making much of a difference. This isn't about you, and it's not about me. It's about us understanding that we have the immense privilege of playing just a small part in a grand story and contributing our small part of this grand story. If you want to think of yourself as the third prepositional phrase in the second sentence of the 8th paragraph in the 3rd column on the 1352nd page of the 3rd volume of God's massive story of humanity, which is all made to build towards His glory, you have a part in it. And I have a part in it. We're not the stars. It's not about us, but it's about us doing our part to help tell that story of how great a God we serve. And by the way, we're going to be working in heaven too. And it's going to be for the same purpose. There's just not going to be the drudgery and the toil and the, oh my gosh, it's Sunday night and I got to go back to work on Monday. Your thoughts welcome, Peter at peterheck.com. That's Peter at peterheck.com. Would love to hear from you, but remember, the smallest things that are done for the glory of God are never wasted and they're never lacking in dignity. The only thing I can't promise you is that knowledge is going to make Sunday night feel any better. I hope it does, but I don't know. peterheck.com. Thanks for going the extra mile with me, and we'll see you again probably tomorrow with a note off the dashboard. Probably so. See you soon.